Hi everyone. I'd like to start with a big thanks to the many people who've watched some or all of my videos, and especially those who subscribed and taken the time to send me their appreciative comments. I had no idea when I started doing these that they would be as popular as they seem to be, and that modelers from so many different countries would dip into them. Thanks again, and I'll try to keep them coming. This show is a bit different to the previous ones. Instead of focusing on one kit or model, I'm attempting to do a roundup of 6 in one go. Let's see if it works. The models featured here were all built without any in-progress pictures being taken, or if there were, they've been lost since. I don't therefore have the material to do a full feature on each one, but still can hopefully share enough of the building experience to be useful to anyone contemplating a build or even just for general interest. One of the issues for ship modelers over the years has been a lack of standardization of scales, and this is clearly shown here, isn't it? 6 models, 5 scales, at least it adds a bit of variety. So, first up, the venerable Airfix 1600 scale HMS Ajax. First released back in 1965 and reissued in various different boxings since, this hero of the Battle of the River Plate is not currently in production. The kit is basic, almost crude by modern standards, but it does have some serious points in its favour. Firstly, it's essentially accurate. Despite not getting the flare of the bow quite right, the rest of the basic outline looks alright to me. Secondly, there is a very good etched brass upgrade set available for it, produced by White Ensign Models and still available from the USA. Thirdly, although not in production, second-hand examples of this kit are easily obtainable, at least in the UK. I checked online just now and found 3 examples straight away. As well as the brass set, I also had some resin replacements for the 4-inch guns and the quadruple 0.5s. These were useful but not essential. The kit parts could have been modified with a bit of extra work. The Fairey Seafox was enhanced by some brass bits but needed a lot of other work doing to it as well. An important addition are the 2 steam pipes down the fore end of the funnel. These are very obvious in any photos of the real ship but missing from the kit. I used brass wire for this. The brass etched parts are well designed and generally easy to fit, helped by the very good instructions which tend to be a feature of White Ensign model brass sets. One thing I would do differently were I to build this kit again would be to replace the main gun barrels. I'm not sure why I didn't do this in the first place really. I expect there are some brass replacements available now. 20 years ago when I built this kit that wasn't the case, so I made do with what was provided on the sprue. The finished model looks okay, but it's not totally accurate. It was built as a display model for the brass set, which meant I had to use every part on the fret. This meant fitting 2 tripod masts as well as the Seafox. In fact, by the time the 2 tripod masts were fitted to Ajax, the aircraft and its catapult had been removed. You'll need to check your sources if you take this project on and want it accurate. Having mentioned White Ensign Models brass work, let's have a quick look at an example of one of their kits. The Minehunter HMS Nurton is the only post-World War II vessel in my fleet and the only example of a resin kit. It's a long time since I built this model, but it was an absolute gem. The casting was excellent, the etched brass was first class, and the larger scale of 1/350th made the detailed parts that bit easier to work with. It would have been an excellent choice as a starter for anyone who was unused to working with these sort of kits. The kit unfortunately is long out of production. White Ensign released at least one other of the ton class though, and they do appear occasionally on the second-hand market. My experience of their resin kits has always been positive, so even if you can't get this particular one, it's likely that the quality of any you can find will be good. So, let's move on to a kit that is available now. Trumpeter do 2 versions of the USS Gato. The early one has the full conning tower, the later as here with the cut down variant. The vessel was modified in this way to speed up crash diving time by reducing the air trapping spaces in the full conning tower. In 1/144th scale, this is a big model, over 60 centimetres or around 2 feet long. The problem with modelling subs for me is that they are annoyingly short of detail due to the design of the actual vessels. You tend to get large areas of fairly plain hull, and it's difficult to make the model look interesting. That was the challenge when I took on this project. The kit is not difficult to build, but I found quite a bit needed doing to it to make a presentable model. Assembly is generally straightforward, but the rear section of the single piece main deck was a very poor fit. This is strange because the front portion fitted really well. Improvements I undertook were a thinning of the plastic behind the limber holes at the bow to give a more to scale appearance, and completely replacing the awful kit armament with scratch built items. All the railings need adding from brass wire. Trumpeter provide the stanchions but nothing else, and these are better replaced with brass wire too. The model was finished in measure 32 3SSB, generally known as the light grey job, which helps add a bit of interest. To do the job properly, the model needs to be weathered though. If, like me, you're not too hot when it comes to weathering, this is a good model to practice on. I remember using a pre-shading and diffusion for the first time, as well as a subtle use of weathering powders and a bit of dry brushing. I've seen examples of Gato models much better finished than mine, but at the time, 12 years ago now, this represented progress for me, and I was pleased enough with the finished model. If you do take one of these on now, there's at least one brass set available to enhance it, which wasn't around when I did mine. However, even using that, you'd still have to do most of the work I've identified here to get a reasonable result at the end of it. Incidentally, a much fuller account of this build can be found in issue 3 of the 2009 edition of the UK IPMS magazine for anyone who's sufficiently interested to find it. And now, another bit of plast from the past with the Revell 1570-ish North Carolina and Washington. The kit was first issued in 1970, appearing as both the North Carolina and her sister ship Washington. The kits are identical, other than the nameplates, but as the difference between the real sisters were marginal, this is not a problem in itself. I completed mine as the Washington, as I had a nice photo of her sporting a measure 22 paint scheme, which I'd always fancied having a try at. The kit was completed to a very basic standard because really it was just an experimental canvas for the paint scheme. The kit is very simplified, with a lot of unconvincing moulded on detail, but as with the Airfix Ajax, it has the big advantage of being generally accurate in outline as far as I can see. It also assembled quite well. Most obvious worst features are the spindly representation of the 16-inch main gun barrels and the awful 5-inch gun turrets. The main gun barrels were replaced and the 5-inch turrets improved. This leads to an immediate improvement in the appearance of the model. The fore and aft stays were replaced with brass wire, and as I had one or two etched brass doors left over from a previous project, these were incorporated too. The SK2 radar antenna was also replaced by an etched brass item. The 20mm gun shields were thinned right down and barrels replaced from brass wire. The moulded on anchors were sanded off and replaced with separate items from the spares box. I was left feeling that this kit has enough potential for a serious rebuild. Even the few basic things I did improved the appearance quite a lot, and doing a proper job on it is a project for the future. I don't think there's a dedicated set of brass available, but there's enough generic items available to cover most of what's needed. Kit can be quite hard to find over here in the UK though, so it may be worth getting one in if you have the opportunity. Now, on to a much newer kit from a relatively new manufacturer, the Polish-based company Mirage Hobby. I have several of their kits in my stash, but the only one built so far is the Mazur here, a gunnery training ship modified from a World War I German destroyer. Mirage work in 1/400th scale as per the old Hella range, and they do an interesting range of subjects. These are usually, but not always, Polish related, and the quality is very good if this build is anything to go by. The kits are widely available in the UK and in Europe, although I'm not sure about how the situation is in the US and Japan. The kit is very cleanly moulded with no flash, and the level of detail is good. Sometimes kits from Eastern Europe can have a bit of a short run feel to them, but not this one. When I built mine, there was no dedicated brass available like there is now, so I had to improvise from odds and ends from old frets. Kit assembled very easily with no fit problems at all. The only part I replaced were the masts and yards. The main brass addition was the deck rail. This was some ancient stuff from gold medal models. Their recent stuff is much better, incidentally, and was a bit over scale. You can get away with this on a bigger subject, but it's more noticeable on a small model like this, isn't it? Even with the improvements I made, this was a quick build, about 3 weeks if I remember correctly, and left me happy to try more Mirage kits in future. I really like 400th as a ship scale, and it's good to see some new kits appearing in that scale. Now that the suitable brasswork appearing to improve these kits further, it makes them even more attractive as potential projects. I'd like to see Mirage have a go at a capital ship. If they produce something to the standard of their smaller vessels, it could be quite something. And finally, a scratch build. This 1/400th scale model of HMS Dreadnought was built a little matter of 25 years ago, and to date remains my first and only scratch build effort. Time was you used to see quite a lot of scratch built stuff at shows and featured in the magazines, but less so nowadays. Back in the day, kits of World War I battleships in any scale were almost non-existent, so once the Airfix Iron Duke was completed, you were pretty much on your own. I remember making great use of the John Roberts' excellent Anatomy of the Ship book on the Dreadnought. The model was almost totally scratch built, the only kit items being the propellers, anchors and a couple of boats. It took me just over a year, and I don't recall it as being particularly difficult once the hull was completed. It was originally going to be a waterline model actually, but I've always preferred full hull, so the lower section was fashioned from crudely assembled sections of the lower hull from the old Revell 1426 Arizona, finished with resin and plastic padding. That was the most difficult bit of the whole project, and it was really just a case of adding endless detail after that. I was pleased with the finished model. It looked good for its time. However, the range and quality of plastic kits and accessories has improved so much since then, hasn't it? Now you can buy off-the-shelf items that look as good or better and take a fraction of the time. The excellent Hobby Boss Voltaire took me just 6 weeks, and the Sadeless about 3 months, and they were easier to build. Anyone wanting a larger scale Dreadnought now, incidentally, has actually got a choice of 3 variants in 1/350th scale from Trumpeter alone, and I notice that Revell have just now issued one as well. How times change. Finally, a quick look at what's coming next. The Ajax in a few weeks, the Cadet a bit longer as it's scheduled for a magazine publication first. Many thanks again for watching. I hope you'll be able to join me again soon. Oh, and if you come from a nation whose flag I've not included on my slide, let me know and I'll make sure it's on next time. Bye for now. Hope to see you again soon.